1.1 is literature. Okay, so Unit 1, Session 1. Literature can be any literary work that has artistic values that appeal to our emotions. If we talk about literature, it simply talks about any literary work that has artistic values that appeal to our emotions. The word artistic here relates to arts or artists that show creativity, imagination in creating artwork that provoke things like music, performance, or paintings. Then literature could also refer to written works with intellectual values like novels, poetry, plays, or essays that convey thoughts and emotions through the expression of words. Basically, we have two types of literature. We have the oral literature and written literature. Oral literature is literature that has been handed down to us by word of mouth from our forefathers, or it is literature that is transmitted by word of mouth from one generation to the other. That is oral literature. It is verbally transmitted. Then the second type of literature is literature that has been documented. So we call it written literature. Some books will call it oral literature and written literature. Other books will call it written literature and unwritten literature. Unwritten literature is the oral literature. So anything that has been documented is what we call the written literature. The ones that have not been documented and are passed down by word of mouth are the unwritten literature or the verbal literature or oral literature. So that is with the 1.1. So session 1, 1.2 is what we call the African poetry. Before we look at poetry, before we look at African poetry, you need to know what poetry is. Poetry can be a form of writing. Poetry can be a form of writing that uses language in a creative way to evoke emotions, ideas, or experiences. I mentioned that we have two types of literature, oral and written. The written is in three aspects or has three aspects. We have the drama, prose, and poetry. And today we are looking at African poetry. So I just mentioned that poetry or a poem can be a piece of writing that uses language in a creative way to evoke emotions, ideas, or experience. So that is with 1.1. So now let's look at African poetry. African poetry refers to poetry written by African poets. Before the arrival of the colonial masters, Africans had their way of life. Africans were operating on their own before the arrival of the colonial masters. They had their own culture, they had their own identity, and they had their own ways of doing things. They were singing, they were drumming, they were dancing. They were reciting poems long before the arrival of the colonial masters. So when we talk about African literature, it simply refers to African poetry. It refers to poetry written by African poets that reflect African experiences, culture, and themes. Africa has 54 recognized countries. So poems from all these countries are termed as African poetry, whether written or unwritten. African oral literature, which is the 1.3, talks about the way of disseminating information from our forefathers to us, or how oral literature was transmitted from one generation to the other. That is the African oral literature. Literature that has been handed down to us from our forefathers. And examples are proverbs, legends, myths, folk tales, or folk laws. So that is with the African oral poetry. Poetry that was handed down to us by our forefathers by word of mouth. African oral poetry comes in various forms, reflecting the continent's diverse cultures and traditions. All these forms have common features like imagery, symbolism, rhythm, or the musicality of the poems that often focus on our identity as Africans, our communities, our history, and social ideas in general. Then the 1.4 talks about African written poetry. African written poetry is just the opposite of the oral poetry. It's poetry that has been written down or documented by some known poets in Africa. So let's move to section 2, which talks about the forms and features of African poetry. The first one is African traditional poetry. Before we talk about the section 2, is there any question on section 1? I have given you the definition of literature, African poetry, African oral literature, and African written literature or poetry. Any questions before we move to section 2? Hello? Please turn off your cameras. We are giving us feedback. Turn off your cameras and your microphones.
Hello, madam.
Yes, dear.
Madam, please, can you slow down for us? It's like you are going fast.
Oh, really?
Yes, please.
Okay. So is there anything
Thank
you want me
you.
to explain under
No,
section 1?
no, so far I'm okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm okay.
okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. So let's continue with section 2. Section 2.1. Don't see their cameras on. Please turn them off. All right, so let's talk about the African traditional poetry. Poetry has been part of our lives since time immemorial. Mm? And most of these poems are recited on special occasions, depending on what is being organized. And we have trained poets who perform or recite these poems, and they are called the griots. The word there is not griot, it is spelled Griots. That is the spelling, and it sounds like griot, but it's not. They are called griots, and they are special people who have been trained to recite poems. So the African traditional poetry is mainly composed for these special people to perform during special occasions. And some of these poems that are composed are panegyric poems. Panegyric poems are praise poems, which give appellations to chiefs or important people in our societies. The first one is the panegyric traditional poetry that is composed to praise important people or chiefs in our societies. All the appellations we give our chiefs in our various societies can be called panegyric poems. Then we have what we call the elegy. An elegy is traditionally composed to mourn the dead or the death of a loved one. There's a difference between a dirge and an elegy. An elegy is a poem composed to mourn a loved one, but a dirge is a song. So please get the difference. An elegy is a poem composed to mourn a dead. A dirge is a song composed to mourn the death of a loved one. So the dirge is a song, an elegy is a poem. So please get that difference. Then another type of African traditional poetry is what we call the mantic poetry. It's in your book. The mantic poetry talks about spiritual insights. The mantic poetry talks about spiritual insights and deals with divination and prophecies. The mantic poetry talks about spiritual things or give us spiritual insights into divinations and prophecies. Then the next one we have is the pejorative poetry. It's not in your book, but it's something you need to know. Once we have what is called the panegyric poetry, the opposite of panegyric poetry is the pejorative poetry. Pejorative poetry is a poem that is written or composed to criticize, or it uses negative language to insult or mock people. Or you can say that pejorative poetry is used to cast insinuations or to ridicule people. In our local parlance, the Akans call it the ekutia, whatever. They call it ekutia. Let me put it that way. In our local parlance, the Akans call it ekutia songs or whatever, or poems. So they are poems written to ridicule people, to cast insinuations, to insult them, for them to turn from their bad ways. Then also we have the religious poems. The religious poems are composed for religious reasons. Some are for incantation, some are for pouring libation. Then we have the special purpose poetry that deals with war, hunting, military, or occupational activities. Then the last one under the traditional oral poetry is what we call the children's rhymes, what they normally use for their games or what they recite at school. A lion has a head. It has a big tail and a very small waist. Rain, rain, go away. All these are children's poems that excite them. So now let's look at section 2.2, nationalistic poetic groupings. Apart from the African traditional poetry that were composed to entertain us, there was also the nationalistic poems that were written by some African scholars. They were written by some African scholars that reflected a shared sense of nationality or national identity, culture, or political aspirations. We'll be talking later about the sources of African poetry. The sources of African poetry are grouped into three. We'll talk about them later under this unit 1. The pre-colonial era, the colonial era itself, and the post-colonial era. The African traditional poetry, I would say, were before the arrival of the whites or the colonialists. So they can be grouped under the pre-colonial poetry. It can be grouped under pre-colonial poetry. Then the nationalistic poetry groupings can be grouped under colonial era or the colonial poetries. So a nationalistic poetry grouping refers to a collection of poetry that reflects a shared sense of national identity, culture, or political aspirations. These are poems that express themes on independence. Some African poets started fighting for independence through their writings or through their essays. Independence or resistance to colonialism and cultural pride. The likes of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Wole Soyinka, that is Nigeria, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana, Ngugi wa Thiong'o from Kenya, Christopher Okigbo from Nigeria, were all poets during the colonial era that wrote poems on independence or national identity. So that is with session 2.2. The African traditional poetry. They are the poems that we had before the arrival of the whites. Then the nationalistic poetic groupings came up when the whites arrived and they started writing poems on independence or how to free themselves from the colonial masters. Any questions before we move to session 3?
Madam,
Yes,
please, you've moved fast for me to even not to know where to retrogress to.
I have moved fast.
Yes, please, you've moved fast.
Hey, on which aspect? We have looked at sessions
What?
1 and 2 already.
What?
Which one?
Please,
Which of the
when you
points
go to the
wasn't
sources of
taken?
Africa poetry,
Sources of African poetry.
yes, the explanations were very fast.
Oh, I see. So let me go over them.
Okay, please. Thank you very
Is
much.
it when I talk about the figurative and the panegyric?
Please,
Hello?
yes, please.
Is it the 2.1, the African traditional poetry, when I
Yes,
talked
please.
about the type?
The pre-colonial poetry, the colonial era, the post-colonial poetry.
I said we'll be getting it's a topic we'll be looking at under Unit 1, Session 6. It's on its
Okay,
own. I think,
okay, please. Okay, please. Okay.
If you look at Section 6 of Unit 1, we have it the sources of the African poetry.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just trying to let you understand where African traditional poetry falls and where nationalistic poetry groupings also fall.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's something we'll be discussing later under Unit 1. We've not gotten there yet.
Okay,
But I
okay,
wanted you
please.
to understand where you would place them or where they should be placed.
Thank you.
Any other
Madam,
question, please? Yes, dear.
please, I didn't get the section 2.2 well. The nationalistic poetry.
The nationalistic poetic grouping,
Yes.
they came up during the colonial era. I mentioned earlier that before the arrival of the colonial masters, Africans had their way of life in existence. They had their own culture. They had their own forms of dances, songs, and whatnot. Do you get it? Their folk tales, their folklores were in existence before the whites arrived. So that can be grouped under pre-colonial era. Before the arrival of the colonialists, they had all these things in existence. They were singing, they were dancing, they were drumming. But when the colonial masters came, another group came up, and that is the nationalistic poetic group. They came up to write poems against against the colonial masters, or we can say it's called anti-colonialism. They were against the colonial rule, so they wrote poems or books on independence, how to fight for independence. And I mentioned the names of some individuals who wrote such poems. We had Kwame Nkrumah for Ghana, we had Wole Soyinka for Nigeria, then Ngugi wa Thiong'o for Kenya. All these are poets that arose during the colonial era. They were against colonialism, so they wrote poems against the colonial masters, fighting more or less for independence. Is it okay now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. All right. So please let's continue. The session 3 under unit 1 says, how African is the African poetry? Any answers before we continue? How African is the African poetry? Yes, any answers? Do you have the materials at all? Do you have the modules?
Yes, we have it.
So I'm asking a question. Unit 3 talks about how African is the, section 3 of unit 1 says how African is the African poetry. Yes. Any answers? I'm listening. Oh,
Please, I'm coming.
okay.
Please, you said unit.
Unit 1, session 3. The question there is how African is the African poetry? Any ideas? How
Okay, madam,
African?
please. Can I?
Yes. You want to
Okay.
try?
So yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. So when we listen to some of our African poetries, some of them portrays our culture. It talks about our culture in a sense where it involves like maybe the food we eat or how it's expressed.
Very good. Yes, Mother.
Please come again.
No, I'm asking the whole class. Any other point to raise? You've explained it well. Thank you. Any other point to raise? How African is the African poetry? Yeah. We have Husseini. Husseini, can you answer that for us? How African is the African poetry?
Um,
Yes, yes.
are you still on the question? Should I answer it?
Yes. How African is the African poetry? Can you answer that? Or can you
Yeah.
share your thoughts on it with us?
Because it reflects the life of the African. It also talks about the African society, what happens in it.
Okay, that is also very good. Yes, any other? We have so many points to use in answering this question. How African is the African poetry? Nothing that reflects the lives of the Africans based on what we see in our culture. One other point is that most African poems are written in the African language.
Madam, please, we can't really hear you. Someone's sound is on. So
You
we are
see, that is
hearing
why I said
to
you should turn off your microphones and your cameras. But people have, the cameras are giving us feedbacks and the microphones too. So please turn them off. If you don't turn them off, we'll get all this happening. Okay, all these feedbacks will be coming up to disturb the lesson. So please turn off your cameras and your microphones, please. To add to what your mates have mentioned, I'm saying that the question 3, the session 3, how African is the African poetry, has to do with the fact that most African poems are written in our various African languages. Let's take Ghana, for example. We have so many tribes in Ghana, or so many regions. Ebbers have their poems, Ashantis have their poems, the Fantis have their poems, the Dagombes, they have their poems. So having your poem in your local language is equally an example for answering session 3 by saying how African is the African poetry. It is African because most of the poems are written in our various languages. We have poems that are written in Yoruba, that is from the Nigeria. That is from the Nigerians. Then we have poems written by Kenyans, we have poems written by Ethiopians. So that makes it African in nature. Do you get it? So now let's look at the 3.1. What is African poetry? African poetry written in non-African languages. What is African poetry written in non-African languages? Yes. Any answers? What is African poetry written in non-African languages? Any ideas? I mentioned earlier that before the whites came, we had our systems in operation. Before we were colonized by the British or the Portuguese or the how do you call it? And the Danes. Do you get it? So when they colonized us, we learned their languages. Those countries that use English, they are called the Anglophone countries. And those countries that use French are called the Francophone countries. Or we can say that countries that were colonized by the British are the Anglophone countries because they speak English, or their dialects are dominated by English language. So the 3.1 African poetry written in non-African languages are simply poems that are not written in our local languages, but they are written in either French or English. That is what the 3.1 is saying. African poetry written in non-African languages are simply poems that are written in French or English. They are not written in our local languages. Are we okay on that?
Yes, please.
Then the 3.2 is African literature written in African languages. I've already explained that. We have our own.
So, madam.
Yes, dear.
So can you say that African poetry is written in a foreign language?
We have African poetry that has been translated into a foreign language.
Okay, so the non-African languages, can we also say that they are written in a foreign language?
Yes, English and French.
Okay, thank you.
That is what it means. It's written in English and French. Madam,
please, only English and French.
Oh, we have Portuguese too.
Okay.
But I don't know of any Ghanaian poet that has translated his or her poem into Afro Portuguese. Do you get it?
Yes, madam.
There's this author called Ama Daku. Have you heard of her?
Yes, please.
Ama Daku. She wrote the book Faceless.
Yes.
Beyond the Horizon.
Yes.
And The Housemaid. She's a Ghanaian. And an author in Ghana. But she has some of her works written in French just because she wanted a wider readership. So sometimes because you want a wider readership, you translate your poem or your work into another language so that it transcends the borders. So it's the same thing we are talking about. So we have people who have written poems, but they are not in our local languages. They are in English or French because they want a wider readership. They want people from other countries to read about what they are trying to talk about. Are we okay on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So that is for the 3.2. Then the section 3.3 talks about the linguistic categorizations of the African poetry. The linguistic categorizations of the African poetry. That is what I just spoke about. That is either the Anglophone English language, Francophone French language, or Afro-Portuguese. The Afro-Portuguese is what is written in Portuguese language. It is in your book. Then the last one is what we call the indigenous language. The indigenous language is our local parlance. The poems we have written in our local languages, they are the indigenous poems. So the 3.4 are the factors that characterize African poetry. What are some of the factors that characterize African poetry? The first one is the indigenous traditions. Poems were written about our lifestyles as Ghanaians or as Africans. That is the indigenous tradition. Then we have the colonial history. Our colonial histories have given rise to poems that talk about how we were colonized by the various countries. Then the third one is that cultural identities of African countries also gave rise to writing poems. Then we have the local language versus the colonial languages. They also gave rise to writing poems. Some poems were written based on the experiences people have had from their colonial masters. So that is it with session 3.1, session 3.2, session 3.3, and session 3.4 under unit 1. Any questions before we continue? Okay, the session 4 under unit 1, we talk about the elements of African poetry.
Madam, please, a question.
Okay.
So please, madam, does it mean that when the colonial masters came, they created their own poems, or they chose ours and moved like translated it into the foreign language?
No, when they came, some Africans acquired education. Those Africans who acquired education, they wrote about our lives in English language. It wasn't the European masters that translated our poems. No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Africans who went to school, Africans that gained education, they wrote poems about our lives. Before they came, there was no poem written in English because we were not educated. Let me put it that way. Do you understand?
Okay. Yes,
But we had poems that were recited during occasions. They were not written.
Okay.
They were handed down to us by word of mouth. It was when they came and our forefathers gained education that they started writing poems in English and French, depending on the country. Do you get it?
Okay.
So it wasn't the colonial masters that interpreted or translated.
Okay.
Ghanaians who gained education wrote the poems in English and in French.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now let's look at section 4 of unit 1. The elements of African poetry. The elements of African poetry. The first under that is the structure. The structure of a poem. When we talk about the structure of a poem, it simply refers to how a poet organizes language, sounds, and ideas to convey meaning on certain words with his or her mode and tone to help the reader interpret the poem in his or her own way. The structure of a poem refers to how a poet organizes language, sound, and ideas to convey meaning on certain words with his or her mode or tone to help a reader interpret the poem in his or her own way. The structure of a poem takes into account the lines of a poem. The lines are the same as the verses. A line of a poem is the same as its verse. So another name for a verse is a line, another name for a line is a verse. And all these lines of poetry have their names that you need to learn or you need to know. Every line of poetry has a name that you need to know. The first line of poetry, what is the name of a single line of poetry? Any ideas? You need to know all these things, though, because you are students that are going to appreciate poems. If you don't know all these names, it will be difficult for you to appreciate a poem. So you need to know them. Any ideas from the class? A single line of poetry is called what? Hello? Hello?
Hi.
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 Hello? What is the name of a single line of poetry? I said a line of poetry is the same as its verse. They all have names. 2 lines, there's a name for it. 3 lines has its name. 4 lines, 5 lines, 6 lines, 7 lines, 8 lines, 9, 10. In that order, at least you should know up to 20. So that when you're asked to appreciate a poem, you know how to mention the lines they are composed of and which form a stanza. And which of these lines may form a stanza. You need to know all these things. So what is the name of a single line of poetry? Any ideas?
Madam,
Hello, man.
please,
Yes,
isn't it
dear.
called a verse?
A single line of poetry is the same as the verse,
Hello?
but they have their names. Yes,
Hello,
Please,
madam.
yes, dear. I'm listening.
Please, it is called a stitch.
It's not just a stitch. It is called a mono stitch. A mono
Pardon?
stitch. That is a single line of poetry. We are on the structure now. So you need to know what comprises the structure of a poem. So if you take a single line of poetry, it is the same as its verse, but the name for it is a mono stitch. A mono stitch. Then if you have
Mono.
two, it's called a couplet. If you have two, those who have their mics and cameras on, please turn them off. We are getting feedbacks.
Mono.
The first one is the mono stitch. The second is the couplet. We have the tercet. That is 3. 4 lines of poetry. We have the quatrain. Quatrain. Then we have
Ivy,
5
please off
lines.
your mic.
Please,
Madam.
is there any other ID on the page? I'm the one delivering the lesson. Someone just said, Ivy, please turn off your mic. Yes.
Madam, please, can you go over the lines and their names again?
A moment, please. A moment. Okay. Someone is calling to join. Let me pick the call and get back to you, please.
Madam, please, I can't hear you.
Some of your
Madam is receiving a call. She said she'll get back to us.
Okay,
mates
thank you.
and from other people keep calling because they want to join the lesson. So they are disrupting me in the first place. Okay, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Please, I'm back.
Hi.
I was saying that every line of poetry has its name. You need to know.
Madam,
If you
please,
don't
your
know
sound
them,
is far.
oh, sorry. If you don't know them, you will not be able to appreciate your poem fully. For you to appreciate your poem, you need to know all the names of the various lines of poetry. Then I started by saying that The first line of poetry is called a monostitch. MONOSTICH. A monostitch. Then we have two. That is couplet. Couplet. Then we have three. Three lines of poetry is called a tercet. A tercet. Four lines of poetry is called a quatrain. Some people say quatrain. Fine, that is how it's
Madam,
written.
please, the third line again.
Tercet. CERCET. The third line is a tercet. CERCET.
Thank you.
Tercet. Mm-hmm. Then we have the four lines of poetry called quatrain. It is spelled quatrain, but it is pronounced quatrain. Mm. Then five lines we have cinquain. 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 Then six we have sestet. Some people call it sestet, but it's sestet. Sestet. Some people call it sestet, but it's sestet. Then seven lines we have septet. 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 Then the commonest that we all know is the octave. Octave. 8 lines of poetry is octave. The next one we have 9 lines of poetry, and it's nonet. 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 Then the next one we have 10 lines of poetry. It's called the dizaine. Dizaine. You can Google them later or even ask AI. It will give you all the names up to even 100. But at least you should know up to 20. Okay? You should know up to 20. The commonest we all know are the octave and the sonnet. We have more than that. We have the villanelle, we have the there are many. Vigintal is I think for 20 lines. Villanelle is for 19. And you need to know the compositions, what they are made of. Okay, whether 3 tercets and 1 quatrain in that order, or 5 tercets and 1 quatrain. That will give you 19 lines. You need to know all of them later. Okay, so let's continue. At least I've given you 10 for today. Then the next one, under the structure, we'll talk about the stanzas. What is the stanza of a poem? I'm asking the whole class. What is the stanza of a poem?
I think the stanza of a poem is a group of lines.
Very
A
good.
group of lines.
A group of lines that form one unit. So the stanza of a poem is a group of lines that form one unit. You know, when you are writing a poem or when you have a poem under study, the poem should have an introduction that will rise to a climax, and after the climax falls down to the conclusion. So if you have each unit of a stanza giving you the introduction, the climax, and the conclusion, we say they are stanzas. And a stanza can be made up of maybe 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, 6 lines, 7 lines, 8 lines, 9 lines, or 10 lines. That can form a stanza depending on what the poet is using for his introduction or what the poet is using as his introduction that will lead to a climax and the conclusion. So please, a stanza is a group of lines that form a unit in a poem. A verse is a line of poetry. Let's take note of that. Then also when you have a poem when you have the structure of a poem, you should talk about the rhyme scheme used in writing that poem. The rhyme scheme of a poem simply means the patterns of sounds, the patterns of sounds used in creating that poem. That is the rhyme scheme. So sometimes at the end of the poem, there would be words that would rhyme, that could form maybe A, B, B, C, C, or A, B, A, B, A in that order. So the pattern will give you the rhyme scheme at the end of every poem. Then also we have what we call the meter. Under the structure of a poem, the fourth point is what we call the meter. The meter is simply, the meter is simply stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry. The meter of a poem refers to the stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry. Then the fifth and last item under the structure of a poem is for you to talk about the imagery and the figurative language. If you are appreciating a poem, you need to know about the imagery. We'll talk about imagery under session 5. That is the next one. But imagery is simply the mental picture that is created in one's mind when reading a poem. The mental picture that is created in a reader's mind in reading a poem or any piece of imaginative writing. Then you need to talk about the figurative language. Figurative language has to do with the literary devices that have been employed in writing the poem. The figurative language has to do with the literary devices that have been employed in writing the poem. This is where the metaphors, the similes, the assonance, alliteration, personification, oxymoron, irony all come in. So individually, you need to study these things on your own. You should, as literature students, who is giving us feedback like that? As literature students, you should know what metaphor is at this point in time. You should know what a metaphor is. You should know what simile is. You should know what personification is. You should know what oxymoron is, because you need all of them in appreciating a poem. If you read a line of poetry, you should be able to know what figure of speech has been used there. If it's metaphoric, you let us know. If it's euphemistic, you let us know. If there is irony or oxymoron in use, antithesis, synecdoche, you should be able to tell us that this line is talking about this figurative language. So these are the points you need under the structure of a poem. You look at the lines, you look at the verses, or the line is the same as the verse. You look at the stanzas, you look at the rhyme scheme, you look at the meter, you look at the imagery or the figurative language. All right, so the next one is the 4.2. Elements of African poetry, 4.2. The 4.2 talks about the subject matter or the themes of a poem. No story is written in vacuum. Every story is written based on something that has happened or something that is about to happen for us to take a cue from or for us to learn from. So every writer writes based on this, having in mind that maybe my story will inspire someone to change from his or her bad ways, or my story will motivate someone to do something good. That is why stories or poems are written. So if you're talking about the subject matter or the theme of a poem, it is paramount, because your poem should not lack substance. There should be a reason why you are writing the poem or the story. So every poem must have its own subject matter or theme. There is a difference between the subject matter and the theme. There is an underlying difference between the two. For what we know from essays, we all know that the theme of a book or a poem is the central idea of that poem. The theme of a poem is its central idea, the central idea of what the poem is talking about. The subject matter confuses a lot of people. The message of the poem is its subject matter. The message of the poem is its subject matter that involves around an event or a topic. So we can say that, maybe I can say the subject matter of my poem is love. The subject matter of my poem is love. That is the message I am putting across. What then is the theme of love? What then is the theme of love? I can say that the subject matter or the message of my poem is love. That is the subject matter. What then is the theme? So the theme of that story, of that poem, will be love can be painful, but it is worth it. Love can be painful, but it is worth it. That is the theme. But the message I am putting across will be on love, will be on racism, will be on romance. That is the subject matter. But whatever you are trying to convey in that subject matter is what we call the theme. So please get the difference. They are not the same. The theme is not the same as the subject matter. The subject matter is the message I am putting across, but the theme is the underlying message within the subject matter. Is that okay? Then the 4.3 talks about diction. The diction of any poem is simply the writer's choice of words. The diction of any poem is the writer's choice of words. The words the poet employs in writing his poetry or poem is what we call the diction. Somebody can use simple, somebody can use complex diction, depending on his audience. If I am writing for children, I cannot use a complex diction, or I cannot use a complex choice of words. It has to be simple. It has to be simple so that the children will understand what I am trying to say. Even our kids in our primary schools, they recite poems they don't understand, but because of the rhythm to it, because of the musicality to it, they recite it. It's later when they grow that they understand what the poem is even about. They don't really understand it, though, but it's easier for them to say and use in playing their games. If I'm writing a poem for adults, I may use a complex language because I know this type of people who understand the language I'm putting across. So the diction is the writer's choice of words based on his audience, whether to use a simple language or use a complex or sophisticated language based on what he's trying to put across. That is the diction. Then the perspective of presentation, that is the 4.4. The perspective of presentation simply has to do with using the first person, second person, or third person in your narration. If you're using the first person, sometimes it's about our own individual experiences that we write about for people to learn from. So the perspective or presentation has to do with whether you are using the first person, second person, or third person in your presentation. Then the last one under 4.5 is what we call the performance. Performance. All poems are meant to be performed. I mentioned at the beginning of the lesson that we have two types of literature, oral and written. The written is subdivided into three. The written literature is subdivided into three. That is poetry, prose, and drama. Poetry is best appreciated when it is what? Recited or performed. Poetry is best appreciated when it is recited or performed. Prose is best appreciated when it is read. And drama is best appreciated when it is performed or staged for us to see. So if you have poetry, first and foremost, it should be performed on a specific occasion. Nobody just gets up and starts reciting a poem. You can do that in your house, all right, but basically it has to be before an audience that would appreciate what you are trying to convey to them. Mhm. So there should be a performer. Then there should also be an audience. If you have poetry, there should be a performer. There should be an audience that will listen to whatever you are talking about. Then we have it should have a special occasion. So we are talking about the features. So these are the features of poetry. There should be a performer, there should be audience, there should be an occasion. Then there is what we call verbal variability. Verbal variability. And this has to do with the oral literature. Nobody can tell me that a story that was handed down to us by our forefathers in the 18th centuries is the same in this 21st century. There is what we call the verbal variability, in the sense that whatever that was handed down to us has passed through so many generations. So along the way, people improvised and added to these stories and subtracted from them. The stories that were handed down to us, people improvised based on the exigencies of the time. People always improvise by adding to it and subtracting from it. So this is what we call verbal variability. Simply to say that whatever we inherited from our forefathers today will not be delivered verbatim. Some portions have been taken out of it, and some portions have been added to suit the exigencies of the time, for people to understand better what we are trying to share with them. Or we can say that there is flexibility in the production of all the folk tales and folklores we inherited from our forefathers. So that is it with session 4 under unit 1. Any questions, please, before we continue with session 5? Any questions? Hey, no question. Hello? Any questions before we continue? All right, so let's continue with session 5 under unit 1. Let's continue with section 5 under unit 1. The 5.1 is, yes, dear.
Please, you see page 19, the self-assessment question.
Page
And
19.
the self-assessment question. The number two, the B question. Discuss two ways diction contribute to overall meaning of poem. Madam, please, can you say something about it for me?
19. 17.
Yes.
18.
Page 19, the self-assessment question. The 1.4.
Yes.
The B. The B, discuss two ways diction contributes to the overall meaning of poem. Madam, please, can you say something about that for me?
Yes, I said it earlier. The diction of any poet has to do with his audience. Do you get it? If I'm writing for a child, I'll not use a complex or a sophisticated language.
Okay.
If I'm writing for a child, I'll use a simple language that the child will understand. So that is what it implies.
Okay.
Diction contributes to the overall. It has to do with the audience.
Okay, madam.
What will appeal to my emotions as a reader of that poem? You get it? So you have to consider the age of your audience or the ages of your audience. Then you use either a simple language or a complex language. I talked about it earlier.
Okay.
You get it?
Yes, please.
Hello, madam.
Yes, yes.
Madam, please, can you please go over the written literature and then the oral literature with their components, please?
The oral literature, I said earlier that it is literature that has been handed down to us by our forefathers, or it is from one generation to the other by word of mouth. It is not documented. Do you get it? Oral literature. Some books will call it oral literature and written literature. Other books will call it written literature and unwritten literature. Unwritten literature is the same as oral. It means it hasn't been documented. Whatever the poem is, it's not written in any book, or it's not written in any other language apart from our local parlance. But if it is written, it means it has been documented. It means it has been written down. The written literature has three aspects. That is where we have the poetry, prose, and drama. That is the written literature. It has three subdivisions: poetry, prose, and drama. But the oral one is just by word of mouth. It has not been written in any book. Is it clear now?
Yes, please, madam. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we continue? All right.
Madam,
Yes, dear.
please, with the perspective and the presentation, can you please elaborate on the second person? With the first person, I think I'm okay. With the third person, I'm okay. But with the second person,
With the second person, is that what you are asking?
personality. Yes, please.
Do you have the material with you?
Come again.
Do you have the study material with you?
Yes, please.
And so, can you read the 4.4 for us? The perspective of presentation. If you have it, then kindly share it with us, so we all get the understanding in your book.
It must be added here that different types of poems elicit different modes of presentation. Personages can present poems from the first person perspective, where the persona associates with the content to the third person, where the persona only recounts or reports. Some poems allow reflections in stream of consciousness, where readers are led into the mind of the person. As you read, the said poems endeavor to categorize the poems by their modes of presentation. Do you think the mode?
Yes, continue.
Do you think the mode of presentation has any effect on the message presented in the poem? There are poems that are presented in dialogue, either one person, dramatic monologue, or an apostrophe. Example: Soyinka's telephone conversation, a more than one personnel character. Atukwe Utai's Rosemaya.
Okay, so listen. If you're talking about the first person, it uses pronouns like I.
Yes.
That is the subjective form, and me as the objective, right? It means
Sure.
you're writing about yourself. If it's
Sure.
about the second person, it means you're writing about someone. Do you get
Okay.
it? And that uses
Yes.
you for uh,
You.
subjective singular and you for subjective word, objective person. Do you get it? So sometimes the pronouns used will tell you whether it is uh, first person, second person, or third person. Uh-huh. If it's third person, it uses I and me for subjective and objective. If it's second person, it uses you for both the subjective and the objective pronouns. If it's about the third person, it uses he, she, or it. Whether singular or plural. So if it's first person and they are many, they will use we and us. That is
Sure.
subjective and objective. If it's second person, it will use you for subjective and objective. If it's
Okay.
third person, it will use they and them. So the pronouns will tell you the mode of presentation used by the poet. Yes.
So, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. I heard Madam somewhere. Can we continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the next one is the imagery in African poetry. The 5.1 is asking us what imagery is. What is imagery? What is imagery? I said earlier that imagery refers to the mental picture created in our minds when we are reading someone's work. When we are reading someone's work, the mental picture created in our minds is what we call imagery. It could be a market scene, it could be a village, it could be an urban area, it could be mountains, or let me use the word landscape, which includes river and all of that. Anything that it could be on animals or it could be on a whole plantation. Anything that creates a mental picture in your mind on someone's literary work is what we call imagery. If I'm reading a poem, the things I'll be visualizing in that poem are what we call imagery. Someone is talking about a place. I will try to visualize how the place looks like. It could be someone's house, it could be someone's church, it could be someone's school. That mental picture created in my mind of how the school will look like is what we call imagery. And imagery appeals to 5 of our senses. Imagery of any piece of work appeals to 5 of our senses. We have the sense of sight, smell, touch, and nose, like auditory. Mm? We have auditory, we have the tactile, we have the visual. They are there, they are 5. So anything I am imagining in any work of art should appeal to these 5 senses: touch, smell, taste, sight, and to my nose. All this should appeal to how I imagine the things mentioned in the poem. So that is first and foremost what imagery is about. Then we have the nature of imagery in African poetry. Someone take 5.1 for us, please. What is imagery? Someone should kindly read that for us, please. What is imagery in African poetry?
One means
Yeah.
narrate the language of literature. particularly African poetry, differs from literal language in the use of imagery. What
Yes.
comes to your mind? What comes to your mind when you see the word imagery? Two words
Yes.
come up: image and imagery. In
Mm-hmm.
sense, image refers to the word picture that creates pictures to bracket as usual, auditory, textile, or a description
Mm-hmm.
of some visible thing or objects. An
Okay.
image, therefore, is a representation of realities that appear to the sense. Imagery, therefore, imagery, however, refers to all words which refer to objects and qualities which appeal to the sense and feelings. That's Gray,
Mm-hmm.
1984 to 102. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, imagery is the conceptual utilization of the image in a literature text. It creates sense impression in reader's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Imagery is also called figurative language or literary devices. In the
Please take
sense
note of
we are
that
talking
word.
in the
So imagery is also called figurative language.
or literary
Imagery is
devices.
also called figurative language or literary devices.
Devices. In this
Mhm.
sense, we are talking of metaphors, similes, and personification, etc., etc.
Very good. So imagery is not just about the mental picture formed in our minds when we are reading someone's piece of work. It has to do with the literary devices as well, or the figurative language employed in writing that poem. So please let's take note of that. Mm. Because if you say something is metaphoric, what does it mean? It means you are comparing two things without the use of as or like. Mm. You are comparing two things without the use of as or like. So whatever you say that sounds metaphoric will create a mental picture in someone's mind. If you say something is personification, what is the meaning of personification? It is giving a human attribute to a non-human element. That will equally create a mental picture in your mind. If you're talking about the sun smiles at me every morning, that will give you a mental picture. That is an example of personification. The sun is not a human to smile, but it's been given a human attribute. So that would make you imagine how the sun would smile like. You get it? So let's take note of the fact that imagery has to do with figurative language as well as the mental picture that is created in our minds concerning someone's artistic work. Then the 5.2 talks about the nature of imagery in African poetry. Yes, someone should take that for us, please. Yes.
Poets use poets use linguistic resources in the immediate environment to create images and imagery.
Mhm.
And easy way to appreciate African poetry is to understand the imagery poets employ and appreciate its context of use. Imagery are grouped into visual, architectural, plantar, flora, life, death, and situational imagery. Imagery, among others, is the concrete image that gets established by
Nti ọmọ start
appropriate
koraa
abstract editing
because mo yẹ kàn jẹ
and portrait ones.
ọmọ start koraa.
Turn off your
For
mic and
example,
your camera.
for
Hello.
example, the imagery,
Uh-huh.
the imagery beard and tender song in Edus and Rub- Rubadari poems frequently make the abstract concept rare for appreciation. A key understanding in African poetry is embodied in African imagery poets employed. So, I'm finished.
Yes, thank you. So over here, they're saying that poets use linguistic resources in their immediate environment mm, to create image or imagery in our minds. It is true. Somebody can write about the landscape of Ghana or the natural resources of Ghana. So in that case, that person is employing the things in his immediate environment in his way because that is what he wants you to appreciate about his locality or about his region. So that is what writers often employ. Things that will appeal to our senses and emotions within their environment are the very things they write about. Things you can readily visualize in appreciating his or her poem. Then the 5.3 talks about the significance of imagery in African poetry. The one is, we have said that it creates mental pictures in the mind's eye. In other words, it makes abstract concepts concrete as it stimulates the reader to see, feel, hear, smell, touch, taste, and move. Then the second one says it gives pleasure to the reader. Visualizing all these things in your mind when you are reading would give you pleasure. The reader connects the concept to the real object of association. Discovery occurs and it induces positive surprise for pleasure. So imagery helps you know what the writer is saying by creating your own mental pictures of the things he's describing in his work. Then it also gives us pleasure. So let's take note of that. Then the last one is session 6 of unit 1. Hello. Are people in this class at all, or they are doing their own thing? They seem to be having a meeting within meeting. They are discussing other things that we are hearing. Then the last one for today is session 6 of unit 1. That talks about the sources of African poetry. The sources of African poetry, as I said earlier, we have 3. Before the arrival of the Europeans, Africans had their way of life. So they had their poems, their songs, their dances they were performing. In all these recognized 54 African countries. We have 54 recognized African countries, and they all had their ways of life long before the arrival of the whites. So that is what we call the pre-colonial African poetry. The pre-colonial African poetry were the poems that were in existence before the arrival of the colonial masters. Then when they came, we have another era that is called the colonial era. When they came, they were poems that were composed because some of our people gained education or had access to education and could communicate in the English language or French language. So they started writing poems in those languages. And when they left, other people also wrote poems that are referred to as the post-colonial poetry or the post-colonial poems. So these are the sources of the African poetry. We had poets that were before the arrival of the colonial masters. And when the colonial masters came to, we had people that started writing poems. And when they left to, another group also wrote their poems. So these are some of the sources of African poetry. Before, during, and after. We have the different dispensations. They are called the different dispensations, before, during, and after. These are the sources of the African poems that we know. And remember that those that were orally transmitted. Hey, somebody is still calling me at this time. A moment, please.
What is on
Hello, madam.
Madam is not in at the moment, so she just had a call, so she has excused herself.
Please, I'm sorry. Oh, a lot of your mates are calling that they couldn't join. That is why I keep going off. I'm so sorry. Hello.
Okay, madam.
Hello, hi.
Okay, madam.
A lot of people couldn't join the lesson. Who is talking there? So someone just called me from Accra that she couldn't join because she's been trying and it's not working. Before we go, please, let me chip this in before it escapes me. How many centers are online today? I know I'm taking it nationwide. I know I'm taking the course nationwide. So I expect people from Accra, from Boku, from Tamale to join. May I know those who are been able to successfully log on to today's lesson? If there's anybody here,
Madam
hello,
Daniela from Accra.
Daniela from Accra. Hey, someone just called me from Accra that she couldn't join.
Madam, Solomon from Accra.
Madam.
Hello, madam. Please, I'm from
Grace
Kumasi.
from Gipos.
Kepu is there. Center there, right?
UCC.
How many are you?
We don't know our actual numbers though, but we were eagerly waiting for you. The few that were here were about 5.
I thought it was supposed to be face to face. Then later I was prompted that it was supposed to be an online class.
Princess,
So all of you are supposed to join.
Hello, madam. Please, we are from
there are a
Kumasi.
lot of people still looking for where the class is actually ongoing without knowing it's online.
It's online.
I think the problem is how the timetable was arranged. You know, I logged into a different class earlier, and later I was told it wasn't African poetry.
I see.
The timetable was a general timetable. So on Sunday from 11:30 to 1:30, we have it's like six classes going on and different links. So if you don't know your program, to tap on your link, you mistakenly enter into another program.
Hey, but you need to be part of every lecture.
Yeah, so you have to be conscious of your program so that you will not mistakenly join another program, because it's all happening at the same time.
Last year it happened. So I had to create another link to send to all my students when it was time. I created a general platform, like WhatsApp platform for all of them because I got the numbers of the courseworks.
Because the last the first Google meeting we had, we were like 90 something, but here we are 50. It means a lot of people hasn't joined.
Yes. And it's nationwide, so all of you are supposed to join. I know you. I'm sure you'll be over 100. You'll be over 100
Yes.
with this particular course. And last year, what happened was some did not join until it was time for presentation. That was when they started looking for me. Meanwhile, they have seen my number there, and they could have contacted me long before the presentation date.
And madam,
Yes, yeah.
there is also a problem with some of our colleagues. They can't join in West School. They can't even join.
Why?
We don't know. We have been trying to help them, but they can't join. So some of them, we are using one phone. 5 people using one phone.
Hey, that's
Madam,
terrible. Eh? What if the phone goes? What if the phone goes off? Yes.
And some people too can't join over here. They are using their Google Meet. They are using the link. It's not joining.
Hey, so what do you do? Everybody has to be part
Madam,
of
I
the class.
think we have to do it like this. Please, are you listening to me, madam?
I'm listening.
Madam, please let us create WhatsApp group so that when is the time we will send a link to the group so that everybody will know that that's what is going on.
And
There is an existing WhatsApp group for this course. There is another one. There is one already existing.
The link on the timetable that is sent.
the link, when you tap on the link, it's not open. No.
Not
Yes, it's
not the
no.
link, not the one on the timetable. There is an existing how do you call it, WhatsApp group. Someone
Please,
joined
that
me.
was the
Someone joined
administrator, so
me.
the administrator add because the link on there. So if you add, it's not what
The
the
group we
one
have is African Studies.
Yes. Please, I don't know which of the timetable that most of you are using. Are you using the 2025-2026 Semester 1 Bachelor of Education, Primary Education online classes link?
Yes,
Please,
please.
are you using that one?
Yes,
No,
please.
please.
You should check that timetable. I think that link that are provided there are very effective.
Yes, mine is even the JHS one. So that was what I used to join.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, please.
And say even that one, you can't. Some of them can't join. When
Wow.
they can't use that link.
no, that is what we are all supposed to use. Both the facilitators and the students. Oh,
Hey, someone. Oh, sound it.
please turn off your mic, okay? Turn off your mic on your
Off your mic. Off your mic. Grace.
We are trying to see how best to salvage the situation or address this whole problem. A lot of people have been calling that they are not able to join. And this is the only link we've been given. Unless maybe we all come together and when it's time, I'll send you a new link to log on to. And code has to be monitoring as well to see if indeed we are meeting at 10:30 to 12:30 every Sunday.
Madam. Yeah, okay.
Hello.
Yeah, madam, I don't know. Some two are not familiar with using the Google Meet. I think maybe they need to, contact other colleagues so that they will give them the right directive so that they will be able to use it. Some are having that challenge.
They need to download the app on their phone.
Okay, please, so if you know of other friends or other colleagues from other centers, kindly inform them. They should contact me. They should pick my number and call me so we know the best way forward. If maybe at the end of the day I should do voice notes and send to them, it will be better than not taking part in it. So yes, dear.
Madam, please,
Yeah.
what of the WhatsApp group? We don't have any WhatsApp group.
WhatsApp group. Oh, there's a WhatsApp group on the timetable. So as soon as
Yes, there is
On
a
the
WhatsApp
timetable, that WhatsApp
existing.
group there, it's not going through.
No,
but
we've
that's what I
joined. I'm
use to
part.
access
There
it.
is a WhatsApp group
There's
existing
a
right
WhatsApp
now.
group.
We have
What I
39
use.
members in the WhatsApp group.
Yes, I'm part of that WhatsApp group.
I'm also
And
part.
so please join. The one who hasn't joined should join.
Or we should this one. There's no administrator. Like if we have the group admin's number, you just send your number to him or her so that he joins you. But this is electronic, so
Yeah, the
I don't
group.
know if you get that number because I'm in that group.
Hey,
Need the link, you. Yeah, me also. I'm not part.
You use
Okay,
Okay,
I've been able to
anyway.
join. You see, the other WhatsApp group when you join, it's not going to. So I thought this one did not go through.
no, some are not going through, but this one is going through.
You should
Yeah,
send
this
the
one.
link for us.
The link is it's on the timetable.
I see people are already joining today.
So please, I've heard of Accra, I've heard of Ho, I've heard of Cape Coast. Which other center is on now?
Tema.
so I forgot so
Ahafo.
go so
And where? Goso.
I forget.
Okay. And where else? Okay.
Madam,
Okay.
it's still so much.
Madam Tema.
Madam,
Oh, okay. So please tell your friends and teach them what to do so they'll be able to join next Sunday. I wouldn't want the situation where they won't be joining or they won't be part of the class. Then at the end of the day, they'll just show up and present their lesson. It's not right. You need to start from unit 1 to maybe unit 6 before you write your exams. So kindly tell them to join. If they've not downloaded it, they should download it and start using the Google Meet. Please relay the information to all your friends who have not been able to join. I'll try my best, create a WhatsApp group and send voice notes on everything we've done today. So that those who did not join today would get to listen to whatever we have discussed. Okay.
Madam,
Yes, dear.
please, I think the WhatsApp group has been already created. So the coordinators is like they are recording. So maybe you can take the video and post it in the group.
The WhatsApp group has been created, but not for all those who could not join today. Right? Some
Okay.
people haven't joined the WhatsApp group we are talking about. Some people haven't joined.
Madam,
But the lectures is being recorded. So those who haven't joined can
Madam, please, I'm
take the video.
find the link.
Madam, they didn't come.
Oh,
Madam, please, I think that this is the problem. Some people are not following their courses and the time they have class and all that. So they get to find it difficult to allocate where they are supposed to be.
but they should be
So at the
cognizant
end of the day,
by now.
we can send messages to all the groups that we have available, and some of them will not get, and someone will even be asking a question like when we are already done with the class. So I think some people
So
are
what
not
do you think we
following
should do
their
about
course
it?
and they are not comparing their courses to
Yes,
the
they are not.
timetable.
Some people they don't know their course they are doing. All they know is they are offering maybe
Yes,
social
they are
studies
offering
and English. So they are waiting for social studies and English. During the course registration, they did not carefully look at their programs.
yes
They are
to
doing, so they
compare
don't
it
know
to
what
the
they are doing.
timetable
That's the
and know that
problem here.
this time I have this course, I have to go. So they are always missing. sometimes someone will come and talk on the page,
Now, all
any
these
of the
things should
page.
have been mentioned. Listen, all these things should have been mentioned to you during orientation, or
Madam, it was
or
mentioned during orientation.
It was mentioned during
They
During
said
orientation.
orientation, I think many people
they'll
did not
contact
participate.
us on the original UCC page. So even the timetable, they sent it to the original weekend program page. All the program,
hey.
they sent it to it.
So if it was mentioned during orientation, then it means the coordinators can't do anything about it. You, the students, would have to
Yes,
maneuver.
they have to know their whereabouts. You have
Yes.
to know that you offer this course. Then you navigate around. But if you are just there, you'll be missing. You'll be missing class by
They've
all
been
the
thrown.
classes.
I was receiving calls to let
Some
people
people
know
in
that
the group
the,
asking
the
which
lesson was
group
ongoing.
which link is leading to the RME and English. Forgetting that they have to do all these things. They are just
Please,
concentrating on
Many
the
people are only
subject.
Yes,
focusing
to
on
your friends
the,
in
the,
students
the
is the
so that
source
subject,
they
of
can
all
be
the
this.
major they
motivated.
chose. They chose maybe social studies and English. Yeah, they think they're only doing social studies and English.
Yes.
Nothing. That's the problem here.
Hey,
So,
and that would be
I
like
difficult.
we
think
are
they
like
didn't
they are doing
during the
African poetry.
orientation.
Some people are
During
doing
the
African
orientation,
poetry, but they don't know they are doing African poetry.
I think that they should have explained more about how to go about with our courses, including those that we are doing it online. Some of the programs, some of the courses we do it online. So I think they should have explained it widely, especially for those that are from far a place like Western and Eastern, those places. So but they didn't do any explanation when we went to our departments for all those things. They said they just gave us numbers saying that if we want any clarification we should contact them. But when you send them message,
When
sometimes they
you come,
don't
madam, when
respond.
you send them, they don't reply. When you send
They
the
said we
e-learning
shouldn't
code,
call.
when
When you
you
send
send
them
them,
message to, they don't respond.
Don't
So
reply. So
that
once
is
I
one
try
of the
for
reason for all this, because we are all level 100 students. Most of us, we don't know our way forward, so we have to be directed, and most of us are doing this from home, so we have to be directed. But it's like we don't know our way forward, so if you don't figure out, you'll be lacking behind. So our colleagues that are far away, they are lacking
yes,
behind because they are not getting any guidance from anyone.
Oh, now
madam,
let me ask you.
yesterday like
Let me
this,
ask. Do you do some of the courses face to face, or all of them are online for you?
Ever since we started, we have never done face to face. Some of our
Please,
friends are
some
doing
of us
face to
here
face,
are
but we
doing
chose
face to
online.
face. Some of us here
madam,
are doing face to face. We the
But
ones
if you were doing,
here in UCC Cape Coast, we are doing face to face, but not all of us.
if you are doing face to face, you can easily contact those in level 200 to know how they went about theirs. If not, a lot of you will lag behind. Hmm? Those doing face to face, contact those ahead of you, whether level 300 or level 200, to get to know what to do. Okay? Because all of you need to be part of the lesson as well as your presentation. Your presentation is your second quiz or so. So if you are not part, it would affect you later in the day. So please
Madam, please, so
talk to your friends from
those
me.
doing online, the presentation, how are we going to do?
It will be online.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the presentation will be online. It's either you do it individually or in groups. Maybe last year what I did was, if maybe Accra Center, you are 10, all of you form a group. If Cape Coast Center, you are
See,
8.
madam, all these things we don't know. Like when I say I'm in Tema right now, I don't know the number of people that are in Tema that are reading like that are reading education and their
That
courses. We
is
don't
why,
know. They didn't
that
put
is
us
why I
in.
need the course reps and to
We
know the
don't even
total
have
number of.
course reps, so
yes,
Yeah,
we don't
thank
have
you.
we don't
which
have
they choose
anything.
us.
We are
They
just
choose them randomly. We don't have
Oh,
course
the
course
more reason
reps.
I need the course reps is to know the total number of people offering this particular course at your centers. If I don't know, it'll be difficult when it comes to the presentation. Somebody is alone in his or her center offering this course. Some are 2, some are 3, 4, 5 in that
Mm.
order. So when it's time for presentation, I group them based on the different centers and give them different days for presentation. That was what I did last year.
Madam, I think that the problem is when they dissolve the centers that has caused all these things. Because if at least when we started our program and we went to face once, we know that okay, this is the number of people in Accra that are offering this.
At first,
We
I
can
thought they
create
said
a
we will
group,
meet
but
first.
they have dissolved most of the centers, and because of that, some of us have to opt for online because all the centers available are far. So that is one of the
So
reasons causing all these things.
those who could not join, I'm very much concerned about those who could not join. At the end of the day, I don't want anybody to lose his or her mark because of these connectivity issues. So I need to know how many people.
I think we should contact the coordinator so that they can do something
Madam,
about it.
those who did not join are over 100 people.
Really?
Because we are many.
I know.
I think we have to contact the coordinator or the Department of Education. Even though when we contact them, we don't mind that we send them messages, they don't even respond to us. So I don't know why during the
orientation,
I don't know why during the orientation they mentioned that we should contact them if anything.
Last year, for instance, when we did the presentation, I realized I had 188 students. 188 students. But proud to that, when it's time for online lectures, I get only maybe 60, at most 80 students online.
This is bad.
So that when we need any explanation, we can come to them back.
That is why I am saying that I don't know the numbers of the students. I don't know their telephone numbers.
But when
My
we
number
are finding any difficult, we contact them.
My number is there. So they should contact me. Or if they send hi on WhatsApp, yes, there.
Please, I'm at Ashanti region, West Coast Center. Please, I'm offering education. What is early childhood? Please, do I supposed to join this class?
Listen, what I have been given is for primary education. I am going to teach primary education students.
Okay. So as for those who are you are not fast.
Pardon?
So I'm offering I'm doing early study, so I'm not part of this class.
I can't even tell.
Check your courses.
You need to check.
You don't check.
Please, to the one,
Madam cannot be able to know all these things.
Hello.
Hello,
madam.
Yes.
Madam, please let me put in some words, please. I think what we have to do, my colleagues and I, what we have to do is that you check your registered courses, draft your own timetable according